Welcome to week 1 of Clicker Training Mastery. I'm super happy that you're here, and I'm really happy with the course. It will be awesome. I'll share my screen and we'll start. Okay. Clicker Training Mastery, that's the name of this course for the next 8 weeks. I'll see if I can move this up a bit. So today I will talk about the content of the course, because it's week 1. I would like you to know what you can expect these 8 weeks. I will introduce myself again, and we will start Clicker Training Mastery week 1. And in this course, I want you to choose your own case study, so everybody can choose a behavior that they want to learn and get guidance on, because I think bringing your knowledge into practice is the best way to get it done. And then there's a Q&A. So that's what we're going to do today. Well, who am I? Just a short repetition. I was born in the Netherlands and I moved in 2012 to Canada with my family, my husband, my 1.5-year-old son, and our 2 cats and my horse Kira. Kira was 4 years old and just about to get under saddle. I have a Bachelor of Science in Animal Management. In that study, like the ethics of keeping animals was very important. So I took that always and always asked, like, is it ethical to keep my horse in a stable? Maybe it's more ethical to keep him more natural, and also the natural behavior of zoo animals was like a focus point of the study. Like, how can you increase their and guarantee their welfare, and that's all based on their natural behavior. Like and nowadays there's a lot of positive reinforcement training in zoos, which I'm really excited about. So that's always like a little bit of a passion to see what's happening in the zoo world. I'm founder of HippoLogic. It's grown into an international horse training and coaching company, and I'm the founder of the Equine Clicker Training Network in BC, Canada. Oh, my cat is just pulling my earplug out. I've been a riding instructor and horse training for 25 years in the Netherlands. I'm a blogger, author of 3 books, published articles in 8 magazines, and in 2018 I was awarded with the top horse training blog, which was really exciting for me because it was based on statistics from the web, and so visitors and views were an important part of getting that award, which really excites me, because I would like to know the whole world about positive reinforcement training, not only for horses, but in general. And in 2009, I got Kira, and she was a wild horse, and I tamed and trained her with positive reinforcement. What are we going to do in this course? Well, in this advanced course, we will deepen our knowledge, and we also will dive a little bit more into the science part of training. You will also practice and learn to implement the knowledge into your training right away, because this will help you remember and use your knowledge. The focus in this course are the principles and the processes of positive reinforcement training, outcome learning via concepts. Because if you know the concept, you know it's easier to apply it into different situations. So I will not give strict instructions that may lead to pitfalls. And my goal is to teach you about the tools and explain how you can use them and how you can combine them as well in order to expand your creativity and your skills as trainer. The reason is that freedom creates autonomy in the learner, but it can also be a pitfall. Too little freedom, you can create dependence on the trainer or teacher, which can lead to insecurity later on when behavior is complete. So, complete, it's never complete. And it prevents the learner to come up with new ideas, their own ideas, and it prevents critical thinking. So if you want to teach your child to walk to school by himself, you can take him by the hand and show him the way. And you can do that every day. But the day you send your child to school by himself, he might get lost because he has no idea, because he had too much instruction and too little freedom. Too much freedom, on the other hand, creates also insecurity and frustration during the learning process because the learner doesn't know what to do. And it can create sloppy end behavior because there's no criteria given in the goal behavior. And that can lead to frustration in the trainer as well. So you have to find a way in between. If you teach your child the way to school and you ask on every crossroad which way do you want to choose, which way, you still guide him, but you also stimulate his autonomy. And it might be scary to him to choose the way by himself, but this is the way to create an autonomous learner. And that's what I want for you. Too much freedom would be showing him a map and send him on his way. Especially if you didn't even explain how a map works. So my goal for you is to teach you the concepts and give you examples so you can see how to use the tools. And there's always multiple roads that lead to Rome. And I want you to become confident and skilled, and so you can find your own training solutions, because not everything works in every situation. So this is what we will cover in the next 8 weeks. This week, today, I'm going to talk about the 6 phases of training a new behavior. We learned 3 in the first course, and I was always saying, like, fading out the click is phase 4, and that will come later. There are 2 more phases which I will talk about today. Stimulus control, what is it and how do you get it? I would like to talk to you about a case study, common pitfalls and how to avoid them. Because if you know what the pitfalls are, you can be aware and you can learn to recognize them. And I also give you solutions to avoid them and to get out of them. And these are pitfalls that I've fallen into many times. So that's how I came up with this list. And also when I start teaching other people, I see over and over again, and I did a lot of interviews with professional trainers, and even professional trainers fall into these pitfalls. So it's just a part of the learning process, and it's nothing, we all do it, there's nothing to be ashamed of, and especially if you have the solution, you get out of it and can move on. Week 2, I'll talk about the ABCs of positive reinforcement training, how to fade out your tools, techniques to get more behavior and click less. If there's time, I'll tell you more pitfalls, because I have a list of 25. So maybe I'll talk about a few of the pitfalls every week. Then we will talk about your case studies and homework. Week 3, I'll talk about how you can turn key lessons into training tools, how to use these to get other behaviors, which is really exciting, because once I discovered that my key lessons became better and stronger, and they became more and more useful. And that's also how I picked those key lessons to start with. Every week we will talk about case study and homework. Week 4 we will talk about the other key lessons: targeting, head lowering, and backing, how to use them as training tools. In week 7 we will talk about advanced techniques, how to use key lessons to build duration in behaviors, because duration is a really big part of horse training, especially riding. And in week 8 we will talk about chaining, back chaining behaviors, and the difference between a chain and a sequence. That's a new thing that I just learned at the conference of the art and science of animal training. And it was really interesting because the first talker started talking about the difference between a chain and a sequence, and everybody had to kind of apply the new knowledge right away. So you saw people changing their slides, like, oh, it's still on this slide, it still says this, but we all know by now it's different. So that was really cool to see that even the top trainers of the world are still learning, and they admit that they have things that they still don't know. In week 8 we will also talk about the case study results, and then we will wrap up. Today's content. So do you have any questions about the course, or are there still suggestions that you would like to learn? Because this is also a good time to share that with me. I know you want to learn more about medical behaviors. So that's why I picked the case study, because I thought it's not generic enough for everybody. So if you can think about what behaviors you want to teach, I think you probably have something in mind that would be a good way to teach it, and then I can help you get them trained in the next weeks. So today we will talk about advanced clicker training techniques. So training new behavior basically has 6 phases, and one of those phases is also stimulus control, which is a big part of training. I'll talk about 5 pitfalls and how to avoid them, because that's really important, or solutions to come out of them if you fall into them. We will talk about the case studies you want to choose, and Q&A and homework. So the 6 phases of learning a behavior was phase 1, the dark blue. Remember the picture, shaping the behavior. Phase 2 was putting the behavior on cue. Phase 3 was teaching a little bit more of the cue by not clicking if the cue wasn't given. And then I always said phase 4 is fading out the click. That's advanced. This is where I got stuck in the beginning. I only trained phase 1 to sometimes 3, but that's where I got stuck in the beginning, and that's also where a lot of people get stuck, because they don't fade out the click. They don't know how to fade out the click. We're gonna talk about that today. Stimulus control. Stimulus control means that the horse acts on the cue and only on the cue. So your cue will be very reliable. That's what stimulus control means. And then proving. I did talk about proving in the Ultimate Horse Training Formula because I talked a lot about the contact shift. So now we have a whole the whole picture complete. This is it. There's no more advanced stuff behind this. This is it, and this is a matter of repeating, practicing, repeating, practicing. And it's behavior, so it's always moving, changing, developing. because we are all living creatures. So phase one is shaping the behavior. So every small step towards the goal behavior is reinforced with a click and an appetitive. We all know this phase, and I really like this phase, because this is the phase where you can really see your horse is learning. You get quick results, and it's very reinforcing for the trainer as well. And the prerequisite for this phase is to have a clear goal. What do you want to train? How does that behavior look like, and what are you going to use it for? In other words, what is your goal with that behavior? And this is what you use your training plan for. Key lesson for trainers. For example, this is what I write in my training plan. I want to turn my horse into a riding horse. That's what I did with Kira. And then that's the goal of teaching my horse to get used to the feeling of something on his back. A saddle cloth, a saddle, a rider, and so on. And then you make a shaping plan. That's another important key lesson for trainers. So you divide your goal behavior, teaching my horse to carry something on his back, into smaller steps. You figure out what is the best circumstance to train this. For example, in his stall or in the pasture, where he can see his other horses nearby and has the confidence of other horses. You can always choose to practice with or without protective contact, because the protective contact can also support the horse. And it's not only meant for safety for the trainer, because horses know that once there's like a stall door, that they have more freedom to, because they know once there's a fence between them and you, that they can walk away. They are very smart. And it can give an extra signal to the horse that it's okay to walk away, and let you, the trainer, know that he's not yet confident to do this. The opposite is also true. Once horses wear a halter, or even a halter with a lead rope on and not are tied up, lots of horses consider that as having no choice, because of their reinforcement history in the past, with negative reinforcement, and also maybe even with punishment, depending on what they experienced in the past. So that's why I still like to use a lot of protective contact, just to be clear to the horse, you have freedom to choose. Because you will be the most successful when you're clear about your goals and your method. So the goals are in your training plan, and your method is your shaping plan. Then we get to phase 2, putting the behavior on cue, and that's also the first step towards stimulus control. So the goal behavior is now basically established. It looks like what you had in mind before training it. For instance, touching the target, like you see on the picture. So then you can introduce a cue that can be paired to the desired behavior. So I call this a training cue. Sometimes in this phase it's a final cue, sorry. Sometimes it's still a training cue. A training cue is more flexible and more, I'll talk about that a little later. Because in training, your horse tries to find cues that will help him understand what to do. And as you know by now, horses learn in context. So the environment is a huge cue for the behavior, and they become very good predictors of what you want, and often the trainer is not aware of which cues the horse is really paying attention to. It can be the place in the arena, or if you are just wearing your money belt with treats in it. So when I got horseback riding lessons in a traditional training school, my leg aid was not the cue for going faster. It was more often taking the reins in one hand, because I was taught to take the reins in one hand to use the whip. So doing this, after I've done this like 3 times, and that was the result of doing this, the horse started to pay attention. And whenever, then I liked it, because I noticed that if I do this, I don't have to kick the horse anymore or whip him, because I didn't feel good about it. I didn't realize that this was also just a threat, and he might not be very relaxed about it. But I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I thought at least it's better than to whack him with the whip, which was my instructor telling me to do. So we were told that a gentle squeeze with the calves, with your leg, was the cue, but that was absolutely not the reality. So in this phase, you can still use the cues your horse picks. You can use them into your advantage. I always pay attention of what I am doing the moment my horse is performing the behavior. I remember one time ago, it's like, I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, my first pony, Sholto, and I wanted to teach him the Spanish walk. I just started clicker training. I was super novice. I thought this is nice for tricks, so I taught him to touch a skippy ball, and then I went to Spanish walk, because that's exciting, right? That's a good second behavior. That's what I thought. But I wasn't sure how to go about it and how to teach each leg lift separately, or just doing uh, both legs, training that in the same session. And I wanted to point it out, and I didn't know how that would work. So I was lumping very much, because I did not have a shaping plan. Although I probably thought I was doing a great job, because I already had thought about it. And it was the first time that I deliberately trained a completely new behavior. And one day I just stood right in front of him, while he was and he performed a beautiful Spanish walk. His legs are really, really high, and it was the most wonderful, excellent performance of the Spanish walk I've ever seen. So I realized that I was standing in front of him, and somehow that triggered the behavior, and I used it immediately as my cue. So that was the good thing of it. I used kind of his cue, and I was aware of what triggered him to do it, because of course he got like highly reinforced for doing that. The cue worked great, except it was super dangerous, because it often caused confusion. Because when you tie him up and you want to walk in front of him, or when I wanted him to lift his leg, or I was brushing his front legs, then he started doing this, because I didn't know how to really put it on cue. So he was just trying it out, and it was kind of dangerous. I was lucky that he was super careful, but that was not something that I recommend doing. So I didn't know how I could transfer that behavior to another more safe cue. So I kept using this training cue, although I managed to morph it into standing a little bit further away, but it was a big learning point. So you can use your horse's cue in training and in the beginning phase to give clarity, because you want the behavior. You don't want not to react for it, because you want to reinforce that behavior. But always keep in mind the safety of your cue. You can transform cues really quickly, by the way, because if your horse performs, let's say, 3 times in one session the Spanish walk because you're standing in front of him, and you reinforce the behavior really, really, really well, then he will offer it again. And that's when you can transform the cue into a better cue, because from that point only you click and reinforce for the desired behavior displayed after your chosen cue. So for example, if I would stand in front of my pony and he was doing Spanish walk, and I reinforced it with kind of a jackpot, and I would stand wherever, he would just try the behavior. So that's when you can immediately move morph your cue into a more safer one. And then you, of course, not reinforce for standing in front of him. And another important thing to remember is to describe your cue. What word do you use? What body cue do you have? Are you pointing? Where are you pointing to? And what is your position to the horse? Are you standing next to him? Or does it matter at all? Do you want to trot only if you walk in front of him? Or do you want him to pay more attention to your verbal cue? And also, which tools are you using in this phase to create the behavior? Maybe you still use a target stick for teaching your horse to move away from you. So that's where you can use your cue list. I'll make a note that I'll share the cue list again. And this also will make it easier to find your flaws and repair them, because my verbal hoof, which means give your leg so I can clean your foot, sounded much like goed, hoof, goed to Sholto, and that caused confusion. And when I changed hoof into voetje, then it was very easy to distinguish between lifting a leg or expecting a treat after goed, which means good. So then it was goed and voetje, which is really a clear distinction. So when you write everything down, it also gives you more clarity. And when I start writing it down, this is also a nice example how it can benefit to write it down and describe your cues. Because with my first pony, Sholto, I noticed I had different cues for the same behavior, because the transition from walk to trot was different than when I wanted the trot back from canter. I was more starting, oh, quiet, trot. And from walk to trot, it was like, come on, trot. So it was the voice was different, but also the words I used were different, because after a while I noticed that just saying quiet was a transition down, which had nothing to do with the behavior anymore. Because because it worked so well, I started to use that from trot to walk as well. So if you write it down and keep track of all your cues, it can give you valuable information. Part 3 is teaching your horse to pay attention to your cues by no cue, no click. So you change the criteria. Now a click can only be earned when the cue was given. So this is also a step forward to get stimulus control. And it's a phase where it's very important to be consequent and consistent in your own behavior and in your cue. And we will talk about that later, and I will show you some ways to measure this. And I have also a handout for you. So now these are the steps that create a solid foundation in your trained behaviors. But the next steps are phase 4, fading out, clicking for the behavior. That's something that's hard to do, also because we like to click, because it reinforces us, because for us it's also a signal. The horse did well, so I did well. I got what I wanted, I got reinforced, and we all like to feed horses from our hands because that's what we like to do. So that's also a part of the reinforcing, uh, why the click is reinforcing for us. So once you have a solid behavior and it reaches all the criteria you've written down in your shaping plan, then you can congratulate yourself because you have reached your goal behavior or desired behavior. You can also call it end behavior, but it's basically not accurate because behavior never ends unless the animal's dead. And it's also almost never complete. So it's also goal behavior is also, it's not really true, but we had to pick a word, so those are the words that I picked. Goal behavior, desired behavior. Yeah, I'll talk about that later for when I talk about the common pitfalls, because that can cause some confusion. Now, remember that the marker, the click, is meant to pinpoint a behavior. So an established goal behavior is kind of more than one moment. And it's a complex combination of all kinds of behaviors like body position and everything. And you don't really want to change much in this point of training. So your horse knows what to do and when to do it. So you can fade out the click, your marker, to pinpoint that behavior, and you can move into just reinforcing. Because your horse will know, okay, I did Spanish walk. Normally it was click and reinforce. I did Spanish walk and I still got my cookie. They will know now what it means and what they got the cookie for. In phase 1 and 2 of training, there was still a lot of room for improvement, and you really had to pinpoint like better behavior. But now a room for improvement, but now you have a behavior you have in mind before you started. So you want to keep the behavior, and you can do that by reinforcing it and even putting it into kind of a sequence of all behaviors. So if the behaviors, let's say, haltering your horse, the first step in your training plan is to look at the halter and you click for that behavior. And then he must be okay with moving the halter all over his body, and he must be okay that you approach him with the halter in your hand, and eventually the desired behavior sequence is to show the halter, the horse moves towards the halter, he puts his nose into the noseband, keeps his head low so you can close the clip, and that whole sequence is the goal behavior. But if you keep clicking at the end, you can become predictable, and it can also happen that you clicked accidentally one day for a slight movement of the horses going up that day, and then by clicking you will train that into your sequence. But if you stop clicking but do give him a treat, then he will just associate the treat still with the haltering. So that's one way of fading out the clicks. And then you can move to fading out the treats. For instance, you give him 8 out of 10 times a treat, when he lets himself halter, he lets you halter him, and then 5 out of 10, and then eventually you only treat him 1 out of 10 times or 1 out of 20 times, because every behavior needs reinforcement. That's just the way it is, and that's the same for negative reinforcement, and that's the reason why in traditional training you keep carrying your whip and maybe even your lead rope, if that's your tool to reinforce him. So we cannot go without reinforcements. But if you just make it unpredictable when he's going to get that reinforcer, the behavior will stay really, really firm. So the click was also a cue for ending the desired behavior. When clicking for a good trot, it was okay to stand still and receive a treat. And sometimes it also can be handy to communicate to your horse, it's okay to stop the cued behavior without giving him a click and a treat. For instance, if you told your horse to stand still after you brought him to the pasture, and you take the halter off, then you can tell him, okay, you can stop standing still now. So that's called a release word. So you can use a release word to end the desired behavior, just to make it clear to your horse, like, okay, you don't have to stand or be in this position anymore. So if you take off the halter, you can instead of clicking and reinforcing, you can tell your horse, for example, the release word free. So then he knows that he can walk away, he can stand, he's not under stimulus control anymore. So stimulus control means your horse understands your cue. He knows exactly what behavior you want him to do and only performs it on cue. So it's training obedience in your horse, not by coercing or threatening, but by making it a pleasant habit and giving your horse clarity what to do and when to do it. So I found this cartoon of the Skinner box. Hi Hilde, welcome. I don't know if you see us, but I heard something. Anyway, welcome Hilde, and I'll just go to phase 5 of training a new behavior. I found this cartoon which indicates the Skinner box. Hi, good to see you. So the Skinner box was a cage in which a rat had to push a lever. The lever is behind him, and then get a treat. And there was also a signal, a light that indicates that he could push the lever and get a treat. So he's saying, oh, not bad. When the light comes on, I press the bar, they write me a check. How about you? So that's what stimulus control basically means. And there's 4 criteria for stimulus control. 1, the horse reacts promptly every time the cue is given. Another word for that is latency. The second criteria is the horse doesn't perform the behavior in absence of the cue. And we already worked with that, like no cue, no goal behavior, which we talked in the 3 phases of training and behavior in the Ultimate Horse Training course. The third criteria is that the horse doesn't offer some other behavior in response to the cue. And the last one is that the horse doesn't offer the behavior in response to another cue. So, for instance, if you say trot, you want your horse to trot promptly. The horse doesn't perform the behavior in absence of the cue. So if you're just walking, you don't want your horse to initiate a trot by himself. You also don't want some other behavior in response to the cue. So if you say trot, you don't want canter, and you don't want a halt. You want trot. And also that your horse doesn't offer the behavior in response to another cue. So if you're walking and you say trot, or you say canter, you don't want a trot, you want the canter. So stimulus control means that the horse understands and acts on the cue. I've more to say about the stimulus control, because the first, latency, you can measure latency, like if your horse reacts promptly to your cue. So you want your horse to respond quickly to your cues and not whenever he's ready, done grazing, sniffing poo, or whatever he's doing. You want to count on him doing it, right? Criterion 2, he doesn't perform the behavior in absence of the cue. So you don't want your horse to do the Spanish walk when the farrier is going to trim his hooves. So imagine what can happen if that would be the case. You can be so shocked or hurt to see that you will use positive punishment in that moment just because of safety concerns, or the farrier just whacks your horse because he's not understanding what your horse is doing. So that can give you a setback on the performance of the behavior, and also maybe in other behaviors as well that were related to that situation, like lifting legs because the farrier is there and was part of this learning context. So behavior is behavior and you can't turn it off. And some behaviors, like standing, are also woven into the goal behavior. So it's very important to be clear about the part you have and want under stimulus control. Criterion 3, you want your horse to perform when you cue the Spanish walk and not the polka, because the polka is lifting one leg high, do a normal step, and then the other, while Spanish walk is high, high, high. So it can be challenging not to reinforce some other behavior, because especially when the other behavior is very cute, or when you can't help yourself laughing, or when other people reinforce behavior for you. Because this happened when I was participating in a Shona crash clinic with Kira, and we worked at Liberty. And it was a huge indoor arena, and we all stood in the middle listening to Shauna's directions for me, and Kira wanted to have attention. So there was like a stack of poles in the middle of the arena, and Kira wanted some attention, and she stepped on a pile of the loosely stacked poles, which made her kind of stumble, and everybody paid attention to her, like all eyes on her, and everybody started laughing because it was silly. It was just silly behavior, and it was kind of funny. So because she looked so clumsy, and the laughing was so reinforcing that when I asked her to step off of the pile, she immediately stepped back on and more in the middle, more higher. So that was even more dangerous. So I immediately saw what was happening, and Shauna saw it too, luckily, because she was reinforced by our attention and laughter, and she was not standing still and waiting patiently, which I, by the way, learned to do very well in that particular clinic. So sometimes you don't control the reinforcement. So just letting you know that can happen. So you have to be prepared and a plan B in mind to handle these kinds of situations. What is a really, really high reinforcer, and you have to be prepared or avoid a situation like this before you have stimulus control, in this case behavior patience, which we worked on with Shauna, and within that whole weekend the whole patience thing was really under stimulus control. The last criterion, you don't want your horse to offer a different behavior on the cue. Maybe you have reinforced Spanish walk very much lately and you ask your horse to target. And it can happen that your horse tries to do the Spanish walk just in the hope they get a treat. Or the Spanish walk became also, and that's also a part of that behavior. It's an intrinsic reinforcer because apparently it makes them feel good to do this behavior. Or they will know they will accomplish laughter, which can be highly reinforcing, especially in combination when the trainer was really, really very tense, that they know if everybody laughs, the tension of the trainer will go down, and I get also relief off of that. And here's something that I will only talk to experienced trainers like you, because with criterion 4, if the horse offers a different behavior instead of the cute behavior, there's a 3-second rule. Shauna Koresh called it the wilting flower. So every time Kira was performing some other behavior, she said, no, wilting flower, and it was like standing like this, just staring to the ground, relaxed, not kind of giving any input. And the 3-second rule is it's meant to give more clarity, and it communicates, try something else, try again. And it's not meant as a timeout, and it's not meant as negative punishment to take the reinforcer away, or to take the opportunity to the reinforcer away, because it's the opposite. You want to give your horse clarity. I will, like I said, I don't teach this to people who are just about to discover clicker training, because it can be, or people who still use a lot of traditional training, because when they get frustrated, they can use it as a timeout, and then it can become negative punishment. But this is an advanced technique. So be careful with using it, try it out and see if it works, because it's always the learner, your horse, that will tell you if it's received as clarity or as punishment. So you have to have a certain level of trust and also clarity, communication between you and your horse to make this work. He needs to learn that the 3-second rule, where you don't give any more information, you cue, and if your horse doesn't react, you give or if he gives other behavior, you just do the wilting flower by not giving more information. So you give him time to think, what was that cue? And then he will quickly skip his chosen behavior and choose the cued behavior. That's the whole purpose of the 3-second rule. If it doesn't work for you or your horse, don't use it. And there can be a discussion about this, if it will be punishment or not. If it does, after all, it decreases unwanted or not asked behavior. But I do believe in clarity, and I do believe in positive reinforcement. And I also believe in intentions, and that horses pick up our intentions. Timeout as punishment, it's more like, I don't want to communicate with you. And your whole body will have a certain anger, while it's like, that's not what I asked, and I try not to give you any more information, and you stay relaxed, will will look different and will feel different for the horse. So I strongly believe in that they can pick up the intention just by reading your body language, even if like how you stand is the same, like the tension in your body. But again, if your horse gets insecure of this, don't use it. But I believe, especially with your horses, from you, Caro and Hilde, all your horses will be okay with this. So let me know if you have any questions about this. It's a nice discussion point. So the concept, which I'm trying to, yeah, yes.
Sorry, but I have to leave for 5 minutes. I have to go to our bathroom. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Just keep going.
I'll keep going. Yes.
See you in 5 minutes. Sorry.
See you. Bye. So the concept, like I explained in the beginning, the purpose of this course, Hilde, is to teach the concepts. Because if I teach you the instructions, you need me to be there, and I want you to be an autonomous learner. So if you know the concept and know how to apply it, it's way more likely that you can also find other situations where you can apply this concept. So the concept is to figure out if the 3-second rule will add clarity and will help you with stimulus control, or if it will be received as a negative punishment. And it's up to you, the trainer, to decide in every situation, again, if it helps or not help. So as an example, ways to get stimulus control in targeting. Your horse reacts promptly to every time the cue is given. The horse doesn't perform in the absence of the cue. The horse doesn't perform some other behavior in response to the cue, and the horse doesn't offer the behavior in response to another cue. So presenting the target must not be your cue, because if you you can carry your target stick with you all the time, and you don't want your horse to try and touch it all the time. So your horse can decide that you're presenting the target stick even if you just carry it around. So you have to add a verbal cue like touch. So then you can practice giving the cue plus the target, and then click and treat when the target is touched. So the phases of training criterion 2, you want to give your horse an opportunity to still earn a click and a treat, even when you don't cue the desired behavior. So you can do this. Oh, I'm getting confused here. Sorry. Yeah, because presenting the target will still be his cue, and now it's time to give him clarity about your cue. So your cue will be the verbal touch, and not only the appearance of the target. So the same goes for mats. It can be really annoying if your horse always wants to step on every mat he sees, just in case to get that reinforcer this time. And the variability and the unpredictability of the reinforcer can only strengthen that behavior. So therefore, it's very important to train this part very deliberately of the cue. And then and only then you can become very frustrated later on. Because maybe you think he has to know it by now. Not giving a cue is no reinforcer. So you can present a target and offer your horse a second behavior that can also lead to click and treat. So you present the target and you say patience, which means ignoring the target and the horse still has an opportunity to receive the click and reinforcer. So you present a target, you can say touch, which can lead to a click and a reinforcer, or you can present a target and you say patience, which means ignore the target. So you give him, no matter what he does, he has two opportunities to still earn that treat. So you don't frustrate him, because if you only present it and not give a verbal cue, which then means don't touch it because I didn't give you the verbal cue, then he can start touching it and getting frustrated, and you can even create an extinction burst. And if you do react to that, you just reinforced that only presenting is the cue. So if you want to test your verbal cues, it's good to have an other behavior which he can still earn a click and a treat. So then you can alternate between touch and patience while presenting the target. And the next phase is only click and reinforce for touching after touch. So you can also just not click for touching without a cue. And some horses will get it, some don't, and are way happier with this in-between phase where they can get reinforcer for touching or get reinforced for another behavior. And since patience is a really, really good default behavior, you don't even have to cue that. And this is just practice, and then it will become all clear. Phase 6 of training a new behavior, and this is really, really the last phase. There's no other phases, and that's called proving. And that's the final stage of training a behavior. And I did talk about it because this is test the behavior in other contexts. We talked about the context shift, just to also to test if your cue is really working, and it's all part of getting stimulus control. But now you can become way more deliberate in proving your behavior. This is the word. So this is the final stage of training a behavior, and also one that's often ignored in the horse world. Think of all the people who train for a dressage test and not practicing around all other stressed out and fearful horses in the competition ground, which is proving, because you're adding distraction to your behavior. So practicing stimulus control with distractions and in context shifts, like different environment, different circumstances, different time of day, different time of weather, is even part of proving. For instance, I noticed that trailer loading, even in your own environment where you train the behavior, if it's night, suddenly there's only one small light in the trailer, and the whole trailer looks different when it's more dark around. I've noticed that it can make a huge difference if it's raining, because the sound of rain on a roof of the trailer can really, really make the horse fearful and insecure, and it's really part of proving. So if it's raining, go out there, start trailer loading, instead of like, oh, it's nice weather, I think I'll be practicing trailer loading today. So, and these are things, now you're aware, and I think you were already aware, but these are the things that are the difference between a novice and experienced trainer. Experienced trainer will think, oh, there's some other distraction I can train. Oh, snow! I never trained trailer loading when it was snowing, and this might be the one and only chance I get this year. Well, not for you, Hilda, probably, but for us, snow is really a rarity. So yeah, so this is all part, and it's not that I didn't talk about it before, but this is more now you have the whole system and all the phases of training, and I will teach you how to measure it, the stimulus control, because then it gets really interesting to see and to measure where you're at. So now I would like to talk about the case study. Yeah, you can put your mics on. The goals of the case study are using a training plan, making a shaping plan, reach stimulus control during or after the course. The goal is to get it done in the next 7 weeks, because that would be really awesome. But if there's still that's just the goal, and even if it's not under 100% stimulus control, after all, they are not machines, but still working on that as criteria will help you really get it really a good behavior, strong behavior, high quality. The goal of the case study is also to let you become aware of the pitfalls, because I will share pitfalls, common pitfalls of training this week and next week. And if I still have some pitfalls left that wasn't time, I'll talk about it in week 3 also. Because if you're conscious about the mistakes you can make, then it's easier to avoid them. And I will also give you solutions to what to do if you fall into the pitfall. Other goals of the case study is to become conscious use of previous trained behaviors, so the key lessons and all the other behaviors your horses already can do, because that will make it so interesting that you were really aware of, oh, I know this behavior, and if I put another cue on it, I can it's the foundation of another behavior. And I will learn you will learn to use the self-assessment tools. So the benefits is practice turning key lessons and other established behaviors into training tools. Implement the concepts in your training, because by implementing them, then you learn best, because then you have the theory and the practice. You improve your training skills by doing this, and it will improve the relationship with your horse. So the conditions of the case study, you can choose your own behavior. I would like it to be a behavior that can be trained in 7 weeks. So if you have, for instance, a wild horse like I did, and then train trailer loading, or not trailer loading, or to train your horse under saddle, that would just be too much and too complex. Medium complexity, so a little bit more than just a natural behavior like standing still or walk or trot, but maybe a combination of those skills. So that's what I mean with medium complexity. And I really, really want you to choose a behavior that contributes to your bigger goal, because in that way you are motivated and it benefits you so much to choose something that you really want. I know Caro wants to do some medical behaviors. I know this is totally new for you, Hilde, so is there something that pops into your head that you think, I would love to pick that for my case study?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the right thing, but I thought if I could get Shakira to trot a whole circle, that would be quite amazing.
I think that would, that's totally reachable within 7 weeks. Absolutely.
She's not much of a mover, but lately she has been giving me trots all by herself. But that would, her trotting a full circle, that would be
Excellent. And how big is the circle you have in mind?
I would have to have it inside the arena in the paddock. So that's
So
not,
one time around the track?
yeah, or yeah, it could be a square as well, or yeah, yeah, that would be.
And do you want it at liberty or on a lunge line or under saddle or all
First,
three?
oh yeah, yeah, sure, all three.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing. So write it down. I created a Facebook group, and that will be part of the homework of this week. Like, pick your case study. How about you, Caro? What do you have in mind? Which medical behavior?
It's really a good question because in January we had our doctor here at the barn, and she looked in Quick's mouth, and she will come in the end of April again and give her medication, so then she can make quick teeth. And yeah, I'm a little bit thinking about medical training and trailer loading, but I think trailer loading is a little bit too much to train in 7 weeks. I think it is a little bit too much.
It did. Well, I would suggest pick one, just one. And once you've done your own case study, it will be way easier to pick another case study for the 8 weeks after this course ends, and then you work your way through the same concepts. Trailer loading, it depends. Do you have your trailer? Do you have a trailer?
That's a problem. I do have a good friend. I could rent a trailer for, I don't know, 1 or 2 weeks without paying for it. But after 2 weeks, it will be very high of costs and financial things. So maybe I will start with husbandry skills or medical training based on targeting, something like this. I think this is better.
And you can also use trailer simulators to practice.
Oh, that's a good idea. I do have a lot of obstacles at the barn, so maybe I could just build something like that. Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
kind of.
and maybe, yeah.
I made I put lots of pallets upon each other, new every week, so it got higher and higher, and all the horses are walking past now. And I also bought a very cheap curtain and put up so I can close and open, and it blows in the wind. So I guess I hope it will help with my ordinary trailer loading.
That's very, very good ideas, and they're better than rent a trailer for 8 or 10 weeks.
Well, there's another opportunity. If you have multiple friends with trailers, there might be something that you can think, okay, for week 1 and 2, I will lend friend number 1's trailer. For week 3 and 4, I will borrow friend number 2's trailer. So that's also something that you can think about. It's for 7 weeks. Probably, it depends on is Quicks traumatized by the trailer,
I'm
or
not
just
really sure.
inexperienced?
I think she's more unexperienced, but on the day I wanted to take her to my barn, we tried to force her with a little bit of negative reinforcement pressure to go into the trailer, but this was the first time, and when she stopped, we cut it off, and we walked 5 kilometers to the barn. So I think she would be maybe okay with it. I think not that she's really traumatized by the trailer. So yeah.
Because what I've seen in your videos is you built a lot of trust lately, like last year. Your skills have really improved. So it can well be that you can, but then you can also lower your criterion and say, you know what, I can do it in 2 weeks, and then the goal is just to let her stand in the trailer for 5 seconds instead of like also closing the door and going for a ride. That could be something that you could later on take as a goal, because I think in 2 weeks I'm almost certain that you can get her in the trailer confident in 2 weeks. So that's also a possibility that you can think, and maybe use the other 4 weeks for another, like, not very complex behavior. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. Yeah, maybe
Just one thing, we are about to kick out of Zoom, so we have to click the link again. That won't happen next week, but this week it might happen. So I will talk about the pitfalls after the break. So let's get back and click the link again, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, see you later. Bye.